Hi friends, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Tammy Ernest and I am a Longarm Quilter, and here on my channel I like to share customer finishes as well as my own personal projects. Today we're in my sewing studio and I have just finished up a video about how you load a quilt onto the Longarm, and now we're going to move on to how we actually begin stitching, programming it into the computer itself, the bobbins that I use, the thread that I'm using, and so forth. So I am doing my Longarm on an Handy Quilter Amara, and this is a 20-inch throat space, which that means I have 20 inches from the back bar to the front bar. Okay, let me tip you down here a little bit so you can see that a little better. All right, prior to having a 20-inch throat space, I did have an HQ 16, which meant I had 16 inches between here and the back bar, and I was on a 10-foot table. Today I am stitching on the Amara, and I have a 12-foot table, and I am now digitized. My prior one was not digitized, it was all hand-guided, which meant that I had to stand here and stitch out the design. I had to get really good at practicing drawing. Basically is what you're doing, you're doodling on your quilt, and just with thread. So 2 years ago I sold that machine and I purchased a digitized one, which there is so many more patterns available. I just love the computerized long arming. So let's talk about bobbin threads. So I almost always use pre-wound bobbins, and this is what they look like. They have a they have a magnetic on that side and just the plastic on that side. And what that does, that magnetic side then hooks, it's magnetized into the bobbin case. Personally, I have left my spring in my bobbin. Some people will take it out. I have left mine in because I have not had any problems with it working with the pre-wound, and that way if I switch back and use my own bobbins, then I don't have to mess with that spring because it's already in there, which is what I'm going to be doing today. So these pre-wound bobbins, I use Magna-Glide. These are available from Filtech, and there's some information on those. I buy them in 6 different colors, and I keep them in a drawer. This cabinet, and on the top I keep all my pre-wound bobbins, and I do them in 6 different colors, and I just keep them in mason jars right here. And that's how I store those. Now today, the quilt that I am working on is not going to lend itself well to using the pre-wound bobbins. The thread color that I'm using on this for this quilt, we're going to use an Omni thread, and I'm going to use this Climbing Rose color. And because I don't have bobbins this color, I am going to have to wind my own, and I've already done, I did about 3 bobbins so far. And later on in the video I can show you how to wind those bobbins. So winding your own bobbins is not hard. Handy Quilter has the bobbin winder that comes with your machine, or it came with mine. I don't know if it comes with everybody's. And I've just wound the same color bobbin thread as I am using on the top thread. And the reason for that is almost always I use the same sort of color on the top and the bottom. I have, the 6 different colors, and I will try to match something similar. The last couple quilts, so the last quilt I had, I was using this light gray thread, and I just used a light gray pre-wound bobbin, so it's not exactly the same color, but very similar. With this quilt, because we're using this brightly colored rose color, even though the backing fabric is, if you can see here, no, you can't see. So it is a lighter pink color, and I could wind light pink bobbins instead of the dark pink. The problem with that is that on a Longarm quilting machine, it is very difficult to get exactly perfect tension. And so if I use 2 different colors, I use a different color on the top as I do on the bottom, you're going to get little pinpricks through the top of the bobbin color popping through on the top, and you'll get little pinpricks on the back where you'll see the top thread peeking through onto the back. On this quilt top, I don't think you would notice it if the bobbin thread was a light pink and it was poking through. It's busy enough. But on that backing fabric, because it's a light pink and it has some colored flowers on there, I still think this bright pink is going to poke through, and I don't like the look of that. So instead I'm going to use the same bright pink on the back as I use on the top. It'll just add an extra layer of design onto that backing fabric, and it will be fine. So I'm going to pop this into my bobbin case. And I have turned the light off on my machine because it causes quite a glare if I leave it on. But normally I would be stitching with that light on. And then the next thing I'm going to do is load this next color of thread. So I still have the gray one all wound in there. What I'm going to do is just cut that off at a certain piece. I'm going to tie the pink thread onto that. Get to the end here. And I'm going to knot those 2 together. Wet my fingers a little bit. All right, so I've knotted those 2 together, and I'm just going to pull that gray thread all the way through until that pink comes on through. That just keeps me from having to rethread that machine all through those little holes. I can just do it in one sweep by pulling that thread through there. So now, just make sure my gray, I could take that cone down, but I usually just leave it on there. It's not a big deal. All right, and so make sure that it stayed through those tension discs right there, and it looks like it did. So I'm just going to thread the last little part of this. Alright, and so my machine is threaded. So, first thing I am going to do when I am ready to begin a new quilt is I'm going to do a plumb line all the way across the top so that I can make sure my quilt top starts square onto there. So, before I do that plumb line, my quilt is tight front to back, but I also want to make sure it is tight left to right. So I have made these little canvas side leaders, I guess is what you could call them. It's just this is some canvas material, a light canvas. Created a pocket, I just have a bar going through there, and I have several pins on this side. So I've pinned it. I usually keep 5 different pins all the way down. That is pinned through the batting and the backing material. It's not close to the quilt top. And then that is attached with the clamps and tightened over on the edge. And I will do the same thing on the right hand side. And you can see I've done the same thing on the right hand side and clamped it to that side. So now I am ready to do one straight line all the way down. I'm going to do this as a basting stitch, and I'm doing it as close to those red snappers as I can without them touching the red snapper. Alright, and now I have a straight line to line up my quilt top with. So, and this is how I go about that. Let me loosen this top. So here's my quilt top. Here is the edge that's all rolled off. This is the left hand edge and it's all rolled up onto this bar. I am going to line my needle up with the edge of that quilt. Now you can see some of it's out a little farther, some of it's in. I'm going to do as close as it looks in a straight line. And then I'm going to pull that straight up. I do not have channel locks on, but the machine itself does not move very much if you're just going straight one direction. And then I'm going to line that quilt top up, the edge of that, with the edge where that light is. Now, you can see right here, this seam right here, this piece to the left is probably a 1/4 inch taller than that part. So I am going to extend this left-hand edge about a 1/4 inch above that line, because I want this edge to be straight on to the line I stitched. Okay, and so I will pin that. So I have pinned that edge right there. And we're going to go all the way to the other end. Bring my needle right to the edge of that quilt. I'm going to go straight up. And I'm going to stretch this part of the quilt over so that the edge is right there by that light and also lined up with that pink line at the top. And I'm going to put a pin in right there. Alright, and so now I have either end right where I want it, and I'm going to lay out the rest of this quilt top. Now you can see with this border I have a little bit of waviness in the border, but because I did the two ends, I know where I want to end up, so I can kind of spread out this fullness a little bit and not have it all pushed to one end and end up having to take a tuck or something like that. I can kind of spread it out a little bit. And I'm just lining up the top of that quilt with that pink line that we stitched. And now I'm just going to put some pins in there to hold it in place. Just a couple inches down from the top. I'm not doing it all in one straight line. I'm kind of, you know, doing a one in the middle, one to the side, and then kind of splitting that and doing a little bit. I don't want to push all of the fullness to one side. I want it to be spread out within the quilt. So I'm going to move down here to the other end. So I'm doing as much as I can, you know, along that straight line, but some of this is just eye judgment as well. Trying to, you know, manipulate the fabrics a little bit just so that they look straight. Like this border here, you know, I've got a little bit of a wave in on that edge. That's okay. I can just kind of adjust it so that it looks straight. And when I baste that line down, then it'll stay where I want it to stay. And I don't have to pin every inch of this. I'm just trying to make sure some of that fullness is spread out. I don't want it to get pushed to one side or the other. Okay, so now let's stitch along there. I'm going to again do a basting stitch. I'm going to go left to right. This one I'm doing hand guided. I'm not having the machine do it. Now I am pushing down on this left-hand side a little bit, and that kind of flattens the fabric out. You know, I can kind of see where it's getting a little bunched up there, but if I just kind of press on this left-hand side, it kind of just gives a smooth, you know, place for my stitching. I am hand guiding this. I am not letting the machine do the straight line because I want to make sure that it's where I want it. And I'm doing it just a scant 1/4 inch down below onto the quilt top itself. All right, all the way to the end. And I'll cut my threads here. And at this point I can take those pins out. Okay, now I'm going to tighten the quilt top up so that I don't have, so that it's tight on the bars. And I'm just smoothing out the wrinkles so that it's all straight. All right, I have this edge right here, and right now it's just loose. I'm going to baste this down again from the top where it's already basted all the way down to this edge, as far as I can go until I run into the bars. And again, I'm doing a basting stitch. I'm not doing a tight quilting stitch. And I'm just trying to tug this a little bit so that I get a straight line from here all the way down to the where it's rolled onto the quilt, or rolled onto the bar. And that's as far as I can go. Let's do the same thing at the other end. Clipping my threads. All right, we are ready to set our area and pick our stitch.